Now, let's create the function used by contributors to vote for a request. So function vote request, and the function argument is an unsigned integer named index. We have a dynamic array of requests because a campaign has many requests, and this function will be used to vote for a request from a specific index. This function is public, and now inside my function I'll get the request from that index. So request, I create a variable, this request we vote for equals the dynamic array named requests, this is my state variable, from the function argument index. We can see we have an warning. Variable is declared as a storage pointer. Use an explicit storage keyword to silence this warning. So this warning can cause problems sometimes. It's good if we write here storage to silence this warning. What does it mean? It means that this variable is in fact my storage variable from that index. So it's an element of my storage variable. It's not a memory variable or something like this. One question: who is allowed to vote for a request? And the answer is only the contributors. So only the accounts that sent Ether to my campaign. So I have a requirement here that contributors of msg.sender is greater than 0. This means that the value sent by msg.sender has been registered in the contributors mapping and has a value greater than 0. Then I have the second requirement. A contributor is allowed to vote only once. So I require that my contributor, this is msg.sender, the account that calls the vote request function, hasn't already voted. This is a request, an element of my dynamic array full of requests, dot voters of msg.sender is equal to false. This means the user hasn't already voted for this request. When somebody votes, I modify the value associated with his address from the voters mapping inside my request with true. Let's take a look here. My request has a mapping variable named voters. By default, all addresses have a default false value. Any Boolean variable is by default initialized with false. So I require that my voter didn't vote. After these two requirements are satisfied, I'll set the value from the mapping variable and this address to true, and I'll increment the number of voters of this request. So this request dot voters of msg.sender equals true, and this request dot number of voters plus plus. By default, the number of voters of this request is 0. When I create a request, I have the number of voters set to 0. When this account, msg.sender, wants to vote one more time, this condition from here will evaluate to false. The condition will evaluate to false because this value isn't equal to false. It's true, so it's not equal false. The entire expression will be false, and this require will stop the function. So this is very simple. This is in fact our voting function. Let's test the function. I'll deploy the contract. The second account sends 40 way. The third account sends 60 Wei. This account sends 100 Wei. And the last account sends, let's say, 70 Wei. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 contributors. Now, the admin creates a request. So, create request. Let's say, children vaccines. The recipient, I need an Ethereum address. Okay, I'll take this address from here. Copy. And the value of 120. And create a request. The request has been created. We can see the request here at index 0. This is the request. We can see that this request isn't completed and has 0 voters. And now, the first contributor comes and votes for the request at index 0. The second contributor comes and votes for this request, for the same request from index 0. Let's see details about this request. We can see there are 2 voters. If this account is coming one more time and tries to vote for the same request, the transaction returns an error. The transaction fails. This is because the account has already voted. So this requirement stops the function. We can see here that we still have only 2 voters. If this account, the first account, the admin, comes and tries to vote for this request, there is also an error because this requirement from here doesn't allow the function to continue executing. The admin isn't a contributor. He is only the campaign admin. Our vote request function works as expected. In the following lecture, I'll show you how the admin can make a payment, and this way he can send money to the recipient, to this recipient, if more than 50% of contributors have voted for a request.